been a while, Cole. We haven't had a chance to talk much here at the second half of the season, but we're getting into the postseason now and talk about a series that I think both Cubs and Cardinals fans have been waiting a long, long time for. It gets started, of course, later on this evening when the Cubs and the Cardinals get that NLDS underway over in Busch Stadium. As a fan, as somebody that knows the Cardinals and follows them closely and writes about the Cardinals on a regular basis, how concerned are you about this series in facing the Cubs right off the bat in the NLDS?
Well, if you guys remember, before the season, you had me on the show, and even during the season, your questions to me were, am I worried about the Cubs this year? My response both times was always, not this year. I think they're still a couple years away. And then I said, I think next year they'll challenge for the division. And then I guess whenever I answered those questions, I wasn't even thinking that they would possibly get the wild card. And so here we are in the first round of the playoffs. We get this fun series. The Cubs are good. And the scary thing is, that they don't really have any pressure. And whenever you have a team like that in any kind of postseason, they're usually a dangerous team because they're the ones that are going to come in playing pretty loose. Their fans are going to be so excited and riled up because this is the first time they've been to the playoffs in a long time and probably the best shot they've had to win a World Series in a long time, just with the talent and the pitching that they have. I mean, Jake Arrieta is a stud. They got John Lester. They've got a good team. And so, I don't know that I'm worried because the Cardinals are a solid team in their own. It's going to be a good series. I wouldn't be surprised if this goes 5 games. But I think the Cardinals are going to have to figure out how to hit the Cubs pitching. Fortunately, they'll only face Arrieta once, I think, in Game 3, considering he pitched the wild card game. I'm assuming he'll pitch Game 3.
Yeah,
I think that's probably how the rotation would shake out for him.
Yeah.
It's going to be a close series. It's going to be an intriguing series, and I would not be surprised if this goes 5 games.
When you say the Cubs are a good team, do you throw up in your mouth a little bit?
Not really. It's rivalries are good, and it's not one of those things. I obviously don't like the Cubs, and it's most of the time with rivalries, it's certain fans of teams that you don't like, and there's certain. Every team has obnoxious fans, and every team has fans that are bearable to talk to about their team. There's plenty of Cardinal fans that I know that if I were not a fan of the Cardinals, I probably wouldn't want to talk to them about the Cardinals because they're just obnoxious about it. But that's what I think about. There's only certain teams that I really don't like playing. The Pirates would be one because they're just so vengeful that if you innocently hit one of their batters, you saw what happened the other night. Even if they perceive every mean ball to be a purposeful mean ball against them. So it's just kind of like those kind of teams I don't like playing. But the Cubs, I obviously don't want them to win the World Series. I don't really have a problem saying they're a good team. I think it's pretty obvious that they are a good team, and they've got a great offense. They've got hitters up and down that lineup, and like I said, the pitching is solid. So the Cardinals are going to have to figure out how to score runs and keep them from scoring runs because I'm just more worried about the Cardinals pitching and really just their whole lineup because they've just been so hurt this year. And the key question is if Molina is going to be able to play, and just the guys who have been hurt this year that are key guys, that they're really going to be able to step up and be fully healthy for this series.
You mentioned Molina. We're talking to Cole Clayborn, writer of the High Sox Sunday blog, cardsconclave.com. It's Ford and O'Brien, ESPN Evansville 105.3. You mentioned Molina. If he's in that lineup with this thumb and a sling thing that they're going to do, how effective can he be for that team?
He's so effective than whatever other option they have, just because he'll figure out a way to. People will still respect his throwing arm. People will still respect him, and just the way that he commands the pitching staff kind of goes without saying. And so he may not be able to handle the bat as well, but his bat has kind of been declining anyway. And I don't know that they would be losing a whole lot there. But just to have him, I think really just to have him behind the plate is even more of a calming presence for the whole team and the pitching staff. That the effect that has might be more valuable than anything else. But Tony Cruz is a good backup, so if he does have to play, it's not a bad option. It's just you can't really replace Yadier Molina, and whenever he's in there, I think it just the intangibles, the effects that has, is just sort of goes without saying.
Well, Adam Wainwright is back in the mix, so to speak. They're going to use him out of the bullpen, but as Ryan and I were talking about yesterday on the show, coming out of the bullpen, if you're not a starter, that all that means is somebody threw one pitch before you got in. So they could bring him in, especially in a playoff game where everything's on the line, they could bring him in very early in a game if a starter gets rocked a little bit. But how much do you expect to see Wainwright in this series?
It's hard to say. I wouldn't be surprised. I mean, Walker's been so shaky that Game 3 may be a game where we see more of Wainwright than anything, but we've kind of seen it the last few years. The Cardinals had Shelby Miller in that kind of role last year. Walker was in that role last year, and it seems that Matheny is really unsure of how to manage pitchers in that role, where they're starters, but they're in the bullpen. It's almost like he saves them as this ultimate trump card and isn't sure when to use them. And then he brings them in kind of at inopportune times. Like, remember last year, Walker came in NLCS and gave up a game-winning home run. And it just is kind of like, I think he's either scared to use them to where if he uses them, he doesn't have them as a potential long relief, or maybe he feels like he has to save them to be a starter if something happens. So hopefully he's figured out how to manage that particular position, because Wainwright, obviously, I mean, that's a guy that's been through this and is obviously one of the most experienced people on the whole team. And if you use him right, it could be a weapon. And the Giants won a World Series using Tim Lincecum in that sort of role as a starter out of the bullpen. So there's a way that it can be done. It's just going to be Mike Matheny figuring out how to most effectively use Adam Wainwright.
When you look at this division, Cole, and you had the top 3 teams in baseball all in one division, and I know we've spoken to you numerous times over the course of seasons and before seasons get underway, there's been, some talk when you've got the 3 best teams in one division, and now you've got arguably the second best team, at least based on record in baseball and all of baseball, now sitting at home and watching how the rest of it plays out. Do they need to look at the way the wild card plays out, or is this, because I got a feeling that this division is going to be this way for years to come. Is that something they need to seriously consider, in your opinion, or would you rather see them stick to this one-game play-in and it's do or die?
Well, I mean, the one game plan is better than, if this would have happened 5 years ago, or whenever I don't remember when they instituted the play-in game, but 5 years ago, whoever finished the Giants, or I can't remember which one of them finished third. Whoever finished third wouldn't even have had a chance at the playoffs. It just would have been the team winning the wild card. So at this this particular setup is better than it has been. I don't know how often it's going to happen where you have the 3 best teams in one division, to where this scenario happens all the time, but it wouldn't be a bad idea to seed the playoffs. I know the NBA, I think, is starting to get to that, where that almost doing away with divisions, and that might help, because it is kind of foolish that, the winner of that game has to play the Cardinals, who have the best record, just simply because they deem the wild card spot as the last spot in the playoffs, even though that person could potentially have that team could potentially have a better record than the East or the West division champions. So I wouldn't mind seeing it seeded once the wild card game is finished. But at the same time, they play those wild card games so close to the division, or to the division series, that it's hard for managers to pick their lineups and their pitching rotations if they don't know who they're playing. So I don't know. I say for now, I'll probably just keep it as it is, because I don't know that this sort of scenario will happen all the time. And if it does, it's just kind of like that's the way the ball rolls. I mean, you can't help it if there's 3 good teams in one division. You can't really predict that.
Cole Clayborn is our guest. He writes the High Sox Sunday blog at cardsconclave.com. Also contributes to the Evansville Courier and Press as a columnist for the Courier and Press. Ford and O'Brien, ESPN Evansville 105.3, and online, ESPNEvansville.com. One more for you, Cole. When you look at this Cubs-Cardinals series, obviously huge rivalry. Both fan bases travel very, very well. The cities ideally aren't super far apart from each other. It's not like Mets-Dodgers by any means. Does either team have a home field advantage because the fan bases travel as well as they do?
Honestly, I would say that it'll probably be tougher for the Cardinals to play in Chicago than it will be for the Cubs to play in St. Louis, simply because, I mean, the Cardinals' playoff atmosphere is phenomenal. It's unlike any other, but I'm just going to go ahead and assume that the crowd at Wrigley for any home playoff game is just going to be so raucous that it's going to be – I honestly don't know how to even – what to expect out of it, just because, I mean, they haven't been to the playoffs in so long, and it's not one of those things where it's like the Cardinals fans are like, oh, we've been here before. I mean, they will get pumped up for this Cubs series, but I think it's just a whole other level for a team like the Cubs that, I mean, everybody who follows baseball knows what that franchise has been through, and they kind of know what this group of Cubs players mean for their fans. And so I would imagine that first game at home is going to be pretty difficult to play. That will be Game 3, I'm assuming. I think it's Game 3, and then the Arrieta will be pitching. So that will be a tough game for the Cardinals to win. So if they can somehow steal one in Wrigley, if they even have to play 4 games this series, hopefully they'll just go ahead and end this series in 3 games. But hopefully when they go to Wrigley, they can steal one and come back home. The good thing is for the Cardinals that as far as they make it in the playoffs, they do have home field advantage in the National League side of it until they get to the World Series. So that's a benefit. But in terms of fans, I feel like the craziness of the Cubs fans is going to outweigh the craziness of the Cardinal fans. Cole
Clayborn contributes the High Sock Sunday blog to cardsconclave.com. You can find him on Twitter at highsock_Sunday. Always good stuff, Cole. Enjoy the series. I'm sure you'll be on the edge of your seat for the next at least weekend and into Monday for sure. And appreciate the time, and we'll talk again soon.
All right. Thanks for having me, guys.